rest, the gift I don't have. Very bad at it. But in his book about the Sabbath, Wayne Miller says this: because we do not rest, we lose our way. We miss the compass points that would show us where to go. We bypass the nourishment that would give us succor. We miss the quiet that would give us wisdom. And we miss the joy and love born of effortless delight. Over the last couple of years, there's been lots going on, hasn't there, in our world? We've had COVID, we've had the war in Ukraine, we've had the utility crisis where bills have gone one way only, and we have had inflation escalating and all that adding up and leading to an economic crisis. And the more it goes on, the worse it's becoming as people realize the impact on their day-to-day living. In these years, many have suffered loss more than normal. We've had illness. And quite frankly, those normal ups and downs of life seem even more heightened because of everything else going on. Because there's always ups and downs in life. There are always burdens we carry. It's in relationships, it's in jobs, it's in mental health. It's even in little things like the winter burns will testify, in broken down fridges and washing machines in the same week. Yeah, woohoo! Everyone carries burdens. And we may look at other people and say they have the perfect life. They've got it all right. Why can't I have a life like that? But I can tell you that every one of us carries burdens. Some of us are just better at hiding it than others. It is part of life to have burdens. We may have seasons where we feel lighter and burden-free, and there's times when we feel like we're crumbling under the weight of them. So it feels that this gospel passage, the last bit of it, is perfectly timed as we go into summer. Some schools have already broken up. Holidays for some people that are fortunate to have them are around, although I'm told that school holidays are not that relaxing for parents there. But, you know, the sunshine helps, doesn't it, to at least maybe stop and sit in the garden even for 10 minutes in the evenings. And I have a mixed response to this passage that says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." In my experience, I would love to cast all my burdens onto Jesus every single day, and then I know that rest is somehow not there at the same time. And it's far more difficult than the passage seems to imply. And so I think there's a clue in the beginning of this passage that was read where Jesus says this: "I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you've hidden these things from the wise and learned, and you've revealed them to little children." Jesus always says, "Bring the little children to me," doesn't he? The children understands. And I think, I positively think that adults, we overthink everything. I think we're going to get to heaven one day and Jesus is going to say, "Why did you make it so complicated? I just said love them." You know, we have to try and find meaning in everything. And if you look at children, they just go with the flow. They accept what's in front of them. They'll eat the biscuit off the floor. And they learn through play and having fun and discovering things. They learn less by being told, don't they? And maybe Jesus wants us to discover something and learn that way when he says, cast his burdens on us. There's a children's action song. I don't think we've sung it here yet. Cast your burdens onto Jesus because he cares for you. Exactly that, you see. Cast your burdens onto Jesus because he cares for you. You see, Tinica knows it. But there's this action, as you saw, with cast, because the person who was creatively coming up with the actions could only think of a fishing rod, that you cast a fishing rod, right? But I think actually there's a bit more in looking at that picture of casting the fishing rod, which, trust me, was never intended because I was around when those actions were born, is that when you cast a fishing rod, unless you're absolutely rubbish, you don't let go, do you? You cast your burden, but you still hold on. I think often we want to hear these words, "Come to me, all you are weary and heavy and burdened, and I will give you rest." And we want our burdens gone. And sometimes, yes, he's gracious and he answers our prayers, and some burdens are lifted. But others, I guess, we're going to go all through our lives with some burdens that are never actually relieved. And as much as we want to cast our burdens and they be gone, it doesn't happen most of the time. And so this passage is rather than saying, cast your burdens and take a run, it's saying, cast your burdens on me and do it with me. Be dependent on me, and I'll show you how to carry these burdens and live well. The next piece of that verse says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. There's nothing actually here without another side of it. Take your yoke upon me. So a yoke is a wooden thing. For humans, it's just a wooden thing they carry over their shoulders. You quite often see pictures with pails of water, don't you? And by distributing the weight over the shoulders on the yoke, it's easier to carry. We see it with oxen. That's where the jewel thing comes in, where the yoke is cast across the backs or the necks of the oxen, and then it has a loop under each one, so that together they pull the same load, and they're tethered together. There's a lovely picture of Jesus, I think, in this image, when he says, take my yoke upon you. If you can see him taking his yoke that's around his neck and sharing it with you, so that together you bear the burden and you lug it along. But as you're pulling that load with Jesus, he says, learn from me. Sharing the load, I can tell you, doesn't give you rest. You can ask Jenny and all the people, Margaret, and we've all been lugging boxes and unpacking and moving and chucking, and to the point that we've got sore backs and are absolutely exhausted. Sharing the load doesn't necessarily mean you'll be rested. And so there has to be something we need to learn in taking on Jesus' yoke that brings us rest, other than taking and sharing the burden. Because he says, doesn't he, in verse 30, my yoke is easy and the burden is light. And you and I know that quite often a burden very definitely doesn't feel light. The yoke is easy because Jesus just says, here it is. It's yours. You don't deserve it. You don't have to do anything for it. I am just going to do life with you. And then we allow him to put the yoke on us, because that shows this is an act of trust and surrender. At that point we say, here's my burden. We're saying, I trust you. I'm surrendering to you, and I'm going to do it your way. There's a willingness to do it his way, which is not necessarily the world's way. And then Jesus and you, Jesus and me, we do life together. Now, just for a moment, imagine him practically having that yoke, and you've got Jesus on one side, and he puts it onto you. And you think of the burdens you're carrying right now, and know that you're going to lug those together. There's some coordination that needs to happen in that, right? Have you ever run a 3-legged race? Yeah, we've all run, you see, you're not even admitting it, run a 3-legged race. Well, you tie your leg to somebody else's leg. If you do not discuss how you are going to coordinate that tied leg, you are fat on your face before you've left the start line, aren't you? And so you have to discuss what you're going to do. You go slowly together, and eventually you get into a rhythm and you run. And if you're really good, you get to the end without stumbling in that. It's a bit like that with Jesus. As we tether ourselves with his yoke and we become attached to him, we've got to learn to walk in that rhythm and keep the yoke on our shoulders, because it's very easy to break away and then to stumble. And the more we walk, the more we feel that tension of when we know we are moving away. And we do that sometimes. We move away thinking, I've got a better way, or maybe it's not even intentional. We just forget that and think, I need to do this, I need to do this. And before we know it, we've even broken away from the yoke that we've been given. And we're trying to do it in our own strength and try and fix the problems ourselves. As we surrender under his yoke, we feel that we have more strength to carry the burden, and it might lighten a bit. And so as we walk, we learn that tension of moving away and being pulled back and staying under that yoke where we share the burden together. And together as you walk, he then teaches us, and we learn just by walking with him, how to navigate the best path through these burdens, how to work the terrain of that burden in its ups and downs. how to know when we've gone on the wrong path and need to move back. And maybe one day in our life, that burden specifically, we can set down and it's gone. Other burdens we may carry all our lives. But as we settle into his rhythm and we move step by step with him, that was that children's song that I didn't know the actions to, wasn't it? We move step by step in his thing. It becomes easier. It becomes easier. I've done quite a lot of canoeing in the Canadian open canoes, and you have two people in them. You can do it on your own, but you have two people in them. And I always struck that in the beginning you're like paddling like crazy and you're trying to get a rhythm, but eventually, I can tell you, over 130 miles down the Thames, you get into a rhythm, and slowly you start to paddle without thinking. You start paddling without counting. You rudder and it moves, and slowly you start to see what's around you, see creation, start to read the river, where the flow's going, where to avoid a boil, whether you go into the flow so that you can go a bit faster there and pull out, and it happens just naturally. It's the same with the yoke. As we walk with Jesus, as he helps us carry that burden, we learn to read where we're going, but we also learn to enjoy, even with the burden, the things around us. But the yoke itself is not the thing that's going to bring you rest. It may help lighten it a little bit as you pull it. If it was going to lighten our rest, well, then we could just get somebody else to carry the burden with us, couldn't we? Any one of us could carry the burden. The most important part of the yoke that Jesus gives us to carry the burden is the fact of who he is and of himself will he give to you. He makes all the difference. And it says this, "For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." In his gentleness, in his humility. Some versions call it lowliness, gentle and lowly in heart. That's where you will find rest for your souls. Sturgeon points out that in the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, so 4 books, 89 chapters, there is only one place Jesus ever talks about his own heart, and it's this verse. I am gentle and lowly in heart, gentle and humble in heart. That shows all the openness he gives us, the welcoming and the tenderness he shares with us to all who come to him and ask him. Because all he does for us when he gives us a yoke and we take it upon us with him is specifically for us, out of his gentleness of his heart, out of his humility. He knows you. You are unique and you are created. He knows what you can cope with, what you can't cope with. He knows your character. He knows your brokenness. He knows your strengths. He knows your path. And so as he navigates with you, he does it in the best way possible for you. And as you do that with him, you discover more about him and more about yourself in that process. He knows you in your innermost parts, in your innermost thoughts, places where no one else can know you. He knows what you need, and his gentleness and humility of heart is given just to you. And it's in that place you find rest. In that part where he knows everything about you and loves you and gives his all to carry the burden with you. Quite often in sport, I can think of two things that I've done. So playing golf, and I've just got back into swimming, and I've decided after 50 years of swimming that I will have some lessons just to, refine my technique, which means you unlearn everything, which means I nearly drown every Wednesday morning now. But the thing about any of those things, does anyone play golf here? Tried to play golf? Oh, that's no good. Anyone swum? Okay, swimming's a bit better example then. The thing about all these things, other sports are the same, is that you learn the techniques and you do it section by section, and then you try to learn to put it together. But when you get it right, I can swim and thrash, and I can do lots of lengths, and I can keep going, and I can go reasonably fast. But when I get the technique right, it takes half the amounts of strokes to do it faster, and I can go further. because you perfect the technique, and the power comes from just clicking it. There's a golf shot. There's a sound to a ball when you hit a golf shot that's perfect. And every now and again you get it. Because everything comes together. And it's not about whacking it. It's about aligning everything. And then it just smoothly goes, hopefully where you need it to go in that. And it's the same walking with Jesus. We have all these techniques. We learn to walk with him and battle it through. And every now and again we'll get that perfect shot where we've just done it right with him. And we find that rest. The thing is, the more you do it, the more of those shots you find, right? The more times you hit that spot, and we will know that rest. Because as his heart leads us, as we learn more about him and he shapes us, then it's not about the decisions. We can do it without the decisions, without the effort. Carrying the burden, yes, but if we do it his way, all of a sudden it goes smoothly through, and we find that joy and love born of effortless delight. I love that statement. To find the joy and love born of effortless delight. And we find rest even in the carrying of those burdens. But all of this is dependent on one critical thing. There's always something dependent, right? Apart from Jesus. Is we don't need to unburden our lives or collect them together and get it all right. We just come to Jesus as we are. But that whole thing starts, in order to find rest and to learn and to do all those good things, with come to me. Come to me. We need to respond and come to him. Dane Ortland says this: the Christian life boils down to 2 steps. Step 1, go to Jesus. Step 2, see step 1. You just keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And so I'm going to end with these words from his book, Gentle and Lowly, all about the character and heart of Jesus. Now, Siri's going to ask me what I want to do here. Siri's just telling me about Jesus. This is good to know. Whatever is crumbling all around you in your life, wherever you feel stuck, this remains undeflectable. His heart for you. The real you is gentle and lowly, just like Christ. So go to him. That place in your life where you feel most defeated, he is there. He lives there, right there. And his heart for you, not on the other side of it, but in that darkness, is gentle and lowly. Your anguish is his home. Go to him, and if you knew his heart, you would, and you will find his rest.